Hey guys, welcome to my stream. Today I'm going to be doing homework on stream, but you won't even get to see it. You're sort of there with me.
You're muted.
I unmuted myself. It takes like a few seconds to it's a delay. Hey guys, welcome to my stream. Today I'm going to be doing homework on stream, but yep,
Oh,
there we go.
it has a delay.
Yeah, it has a delay. I don't even think they can hear you.
Oh, they can hear me.
Okay. Well, I have a whole packet of makeup work to do, and I thought it'd be really funny. So today, hold on, let me join the chat. It's a live stream. It's live stream VC, gang. It's a live stream VC. Mm, fine. I'll make him a standard moderator because he's my brother. Alright, anyway. Who just joined? What the fuck was that sound, gang? Okay, so today, hold on, I could probably make it, so we're gonna be reading, a book called The Great Gatsby, because why the fuck not, and because I have an assignment on it. Here, you guys get your Sour Patch Kids, I'll put them over here for you. And let me insert this new image so you know what book we're reading. I literally don't know what to say, why did you... Here we go, gang. Okay, here's the book. This is what we're reading today. Alright, you guys ready? You just see me pull it on stream. The most cheek and funny stream. Alright, let me open up my
I kind of exposed my full name there. I need to change this.
They can't even see you on my stream. They can't even see anything. They just see the chat.
Yes, I need to change my freaking channel name.
Okay, I have questions too, so if you guys want to do the work with me as well, that'd be chill. I have to read the first 3 chapters of this. It's a giant thick book. You guys ready to begin? Are you ready to begin, Planet? Here, I'll turn on start virtual camera and turn on my camera too for you. Yeah, you don't even have to watch stream, you get it from here.
I get it from here.
Alright, anyway. Time for serious reading. Chapter 1. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. He didn't say more, but we've been unusually communicative in a reserved way. I understand that he meant a great deal more than that. In consequence, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments, a habit that has opened up many curious natures to me and also made me the victim of not a few veteran bores. The abnormal mind is quick to detect and attach itself to this quality when it appears in a normal person. And so when it came about that in college, I was unjustly accused of being a politician. Oh no. Because I was a privy to the secret griefs of wild, unknown men, most of the confidences were unsought. Frequently I have feigned sleep, preoccupation, or hostile lividity. Lividity? I have never heard that word. I'm going to circle that. When I realized by some unmistakable sign that an intimate revelation was quivering on the horizon. For the intimate revelations of young men, or at least in terms in which they express them, are usually plagiaristic and marred by obvious suppressions. Reserving judgments is a matter of infinite hope. I am still afraid of missing something that if if I forgot that, as my father snobbishly suggested, I snobbishly repeat, A sense of the fundamental decencies is parceled out unequally at birth. Get water.
Pick some up.
Yeah, I'm taking a sip of water.
Water break, guys.
And after boasting this way of my tolerance, I come to the admission that it has a limit. Conduct may be founded on the hard rock or the wet marshes, but after a certain point, I don't care what it's founded on. When I came back from the East last autumn, I felt that I wanted the world to be in uniform and at some sort of moral attention forever. I wanted no more than righteous excursions to be in
Or I'm gonna
uniform.
stop screaming into the microphone now.
It, excursions with
No, you
privilege.
should totally add my image into the live stream, bro.
Oh yeah, add my
Make
images
let
too. I'm gonna be
let's
here.
God,
add
can you
Dr.
guys wait till
Plant
I
too.
finish this paragraph? I will
No.
mute you, both of you. You know what?
What am
You're
I
being
doing?
muted. No, Misk, you're being muted till after this paragraph. Anyway, back to the paragraph. With privileged glimpses into the human heart, only Gatsby, the man who gave his name to this book, was exempt from my reaction. Gapsy, who represented everything for which I have an unaffected scorn. If personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures, then there was something gorgeous about him, something heightened sensitivity to the promises of life, as if he were related to one of those intricate machines that registered earthquakes 10,000 miles away. This responsiveness had nothing to do with that flabby impressionability with which is dignified under the name of creative temperament. It was an extraordinary gift for hope, a romantic readiness such as I have never found in another person, which is not likely I shall ever find again. No, Gatsby turned out all right in the end. It is what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short, whitened elevations of man. Okay. Okay, let me get these two idiots so they shut up. I'll get them into the thing and then we can get back to our scheduled reading. So let's start with E. Replace that with M. Make you really small. There you go. And let's grab Misk.
Yo.
I think he's invisible because I muted him. Join back in the stream if you want to talk, gang.
Bro, my sister was literally watching you for a split second, then she noticed me.
Alright, now let's go back. Let's go back into the book. This is the 5th paragraph, by the way, gang. Alright. My family have been prominent, well-to-do people in this middle western city for 3 generations. The Carraways are something of a clan, and we have a tradition that we're descended from the Dukes of... That is a weird word, Bukalech. But the actual founder of my line was my grandfather's brother, who came here in 51 to set a substitute to the Civil War and started a wholesale hardware business that my father carries on today. I never saw this great what I'm supposed to look like him, with special references to the rather hard-boiled painting that hangs in my father's office. I graduated from New Haven in 1915, just a quarter of a century after my father, and a little later I participated in that delayed Teutonic migration known as the Great War. I enjoyed the counter raid so thoroughly that I came back restless. Instead of being in the warm center of the world, the Middle East now seemed like a ragged edge of the universe, so I decided to go east to learn about the bond business. Everyone knew I was in the bond business, so I suppose I could support one more single man. All my aunts and uncles talked it over as if they were choosing a prep school for me and finally said, "Why, yes," with very grave, hesitant faces. Father had agreed to find Nancy for a year, and after various delays, I came east permanently. I thought in the spring of 22.
Ooh,
Yeah, it's pretty intense so far.
very much is, yeah. Amazing audiobook.
I got my papers for. So we're gonna after every chapter, I'll stop and then read you the questions I have on my paper, so it counts as studying together.
Oh, great. Everyone, pick your
You
battle
don't
because
have to answer the questions, but I have to read them out loud. The practical thing was to find rooms in the city. But it was a warm season, and I have just left a country of wide lawns and friendly trees. So when a young man at the office suggested that we take a house together in a commuting town, it sounded like a great idea. He found the house a weather-beaten cardboard bungalow at $80 a month. But at last minute, the firm ordered him to Washington, and I went out to the country alone. I had a dog, at least. I had him for a few days until the raid. And then old Dodge and a Finnish woman who made my bed and crooked breakfast and muttered Finnish wisdom to herself over the electric stove. It was lonely for a day or so until one morning some man more recently arrived than I thought stopped me on the road. "How do you get to West Eggville?" he asked helpfully. Oh, helplessly. I told him, and as I walked on, I was lonely no longer. I was a guide, a pathfinder, an original settler. He had casually conferred me on the freedom of the neighborhood. And so, with the sunshine and the great burst of leaves growing on the trees, just as things grow in fast movies, I had that familiar conviction that life was beginning over again, and with the summer. There was so much to read, for one thing, and so much fine health to be pulled down out of the young, breath-giving air. I bought a dozen volumes of on baking and credit and investment securities, and they stood on my shelf in red and gold like new money from the mint, promising to unfold the shining secrets that only Midas and Morgan and Maecenas knew. And I had the high intention of reading many other books besides. I was rather literary in college. One year I wrote a series of very solemn and obvious editorials for the Yale News, and now I was going to bring back all such things to my life and become again that most limited of all specialists, the well-rounded man. This isn't just an epigram. Life is much more successfully looked at from a single window, after all.
Sorry about that. That's my little sister.
It was a matter of chance that I should have rented a house in one of the strangest communities in North America. It was on that slender, rich, righteous island with the extends itself due east of New York, and where there are, among other natural curiosities, two unusual formations of land of and 20 miles from the city, a pair of enormous eggs, identical in contour, and separated only by a quartzy bay, just out of the most domesticated body of salt water in the Western Hemisphere, the great wet barnyard of Long Island Sound. They're not perfect ovals like the egg in the Columbus story. They're both crushed flat at the contact end, but their physical resemblance must be a source of perpetual wonder to the gulls that fly overhead. To the wingless is a more interesting phenomenon in their dissimilitude in every particular except shape and size. I lived at West Egg, the well less fashionable of the two. Though this is a most superficial tag to express the bizarre and not a little sinister contrast between them, my house was at the very tip of the egg, only 50 yards from the Sound. and squeezed right between two huge places that rented for 12 or 15,000 a season. The one on my right was a colossal affair by any standard, a factual imitation. It was a factual imitation of some Hotel de Ville in Normandy, with a tower on one side spanking anew under a thin beard of raw ivy, and a marble swimming pool in the more than 40 acres of lawn and garden. It was Gatsby's mansion, or rather, as I didn't know Mr. Gatsby, it was a mansion inhabited by a gentleman of that name. My own house was an eyesore, but it was a small eyesore and it had been overlooked. So I had a view of the water, a partial view of my neighbor's lawn in the consoling proximity of millionaires, all for $80 a month. Across the Quartzy Bay, the White Palace's fashionable East Egg glittered along the water. And the history of the summer really begins on the evening I drove over there to have dinner with Tom Butchins. Daisy was my second cousin, once removed, and I known Tom in college, and just after the war I spent 2 days with them in Chicago. Her husband, among various physical accomplishments, had been one of the most powerful ends that ever played football at New Haven. A national figure in one way, one of those men who such sorry, an acute limit excellence at 21 that everything afterwards savors of anticlimax. His family were enormously wealthy. Even in college, his freedom more with money was a matter of for reproach. But now he left Chicago to come the East in a fashion that rather took your breath away. For instance, he'd bought down a string of polo ponies from a lake forest. It was hard to realize that a man in my own generation was wealthy enough to do that. Why they came east, I don't know. They had spent a year in France for no particular reason, and then drifted here and there unrestfully, whether people played polo or were rich together. This was a permanent ruse, said Daisy of the telephone, but I didn't believe it. If I had no sight into Daisy's heart, but I felt that Tom would drift on forever, seeking a little wistfully for the dramatic turbulence of some incoverable football game. And so it happened that on a warm, windy evening, I drove over to East Egg to see two old friends whom I scarcely knew at all. Their house was even more irregular than I suspected, a cheerful red and white Georgian colonial mansion overlooking the bay. The lawn started at the beach and ran towards the door for a quarter of the mile, jumping over sundials and brick walls and burning gardens. Finally, when it reached the house, drifting up the side in bright vines, as though for a momentum of its run, the front was broken by a line of French windows, glowing now with reflected gold and wide open to the warmth of a windy afternoon, and Tom Buchanan, in riding clothes, was standing there with his legs apart on the front porch. He had changed since his New Haven years. Now he was a sturdy, straw-haired man of 30, rather than a hard mouth and a supercilious manner. Two shining, arrogant eyes had established dominance over his face and gave him the appearance of always leaning aggressively forward. Not even the effeminate swank of his riding clothes could hide the enormous power of that body. He seemed to fill those glistening boots until he strained the top lacing, and you could see a great pack of muscle shifting when his shoulder moved under his thin coat. It was a body capable of enormous leverage, a cruel body. Fryletsky, you're going in timeout. Don't throw paper at the teacher. Timeout. Go in timeout.
Is that what he
Anyway,
did?
yeah, he says throws paper. I pooped on my. Nope, he's going in timeout. I'm sorry, gang. Hold on. Let me, he's in timeout for 5 minutes. Anyway, back to our book. Since we have a very his speaking voice, a gruff, husky tenor added to the impression of the fractionness he conveyed. There was a touch of per, parental contempt in it, even if towards people he liked, and there was men at New Haven who hated his guts. Now, don't think in my opinion on these matters is final, he seemed to say. Just because I'm stronger and more of a man than you are, we were in the same senior society, and while we were never intimate, I always had an impression that he proved to me and wanted me to like him in some harsh, defiant wistfulness of his own. Ready, no. Apologize to Dr. Planet. Come on. Why'd you do that? Dr. Planet, I give you permission to spitball them back, don't worry.
I spit on
You're also going. Stop the desk, bro. We talked for a few minutes on the sunny porch. I've got a nice place here, he said, his eyes flashing about restfully. Turning me around by one arm, he moved a broad, flat hand along the front vista, including in its sweep a sunken Italian garden. A half acre of deep, pungent roses and a snub-nosed motorboat that bumped the tide offshore. It belonged to Demain, the oil man. He turned me around again, politely and abruptly. We'll go inside. We walked through a high hallway into a bright, rosy-colored space. He's fragilely bound into the house by a French windows at either end. The windows were ajar and gleaming white against the fresh grass outside that seemed to grow a little way into the house. A breeze blew through the room, blue curtains in at one end and out the other like pale flags, twisting them up through the frosted wedding cake of the ceiling, then rippled over the wine-colored rug, making a shadow on it as the wind does on the sea. I'm not used to reading out loud.
I can tell.
What the Okay, you're also going in timeout, bro.
Wait, no, what did I do?
No, the other person. I time outed them for 30 minutes for saying that. They don't even get a 5 minute, they get 30 minutes.
Damn.
Anyway, the only completely stationary object in the room was an enormous couch on which two young women were buoyed up as though upon an anchored balloon. They were both in white, and their dresses were rippling and fluttering as if they'd just been blown back in after a short flight around the house. I must have stood for a few moments listening to the whip and snap of the curtains and the groan of a picture on the wall. Then there was a boom as Tom Buchanan shut the rear windows and the caught wind died out about on the room, and the curtains and rugs and the two young women ballooned slowly to the floor. The younger of the two was a stranger to me. She was extended full length at her end of the divan, completely motionless, and with her chin raised a little, as if she were balancing something on it which was quite likely to fall. If she saw me at the corner of her eye, she gave no hint of it. Indeed, I was almost surprised into a murmuring an apology for having disturbed her by coming in. The other girl, Daisy made an attempt to rise. She leaned slightly forward with a conscious expression and then laughed. I'm paralyzed with happiness. She laughed again after she said something very wimpy and held my hand up for movement, looking up into my face, promising that there was no one in the world she wanted to see the way she had. She hinted in a murmur that the surname of balancing the girl was Baker. I've heard it said that Daisy's murmur was only to make people lean toward her, a relevant criticism that made it no less charming. At any Right, Miss Baker's lips fluttered. She nodded at me with an almost incredulity, and then quickly tipped her head back again. The object she was vacillating that had oddly tottered a little and given her something of a fright. Again, a sort of an apology arose to my lips. Almost any exhibition of complete self-sufficiency drawn was a stunned tribute from me. I looked back at my cousin, who began to ask me questions in her low, thrilling voice. It was the voice that the ear follows up and down, as if each speech is an arrangement of notes that will never be played again. Her face sad and lovely, with bright things in it, bright eyes and a bright, passionate mouth. But there was an excitement in her voice that men who cared for her had found difficult to forget. A singing compulsion, a whispered, "Listen," a promise that she had done gay, exciting things just a while since there were gay, exciting things hovering in the next hour. For context, gay in this book I'm pretty sure means happy. Since it was written back in the day, gay didn't always mean pride, it used to mean happy. Just throwing that out there. I told her how I stopped off in Chicago for a day, on my way east, and how a dozen people have sent their love through me. "Do they miss me?" she cried ecstatically. "The whole town is desolate, and all the cars had left rear wheel painted it as black as morning wreath, and there's a persistent wail all night long the north shore. How gorgeous! Let's go back, Tom, tomorrow," she added irreverently. "You ought to see the baby." "I'd like to. She's been asleep. She's 3 years old. Haven't you seen her?" "Never." "Well, she asked you to see her. She's—" Tom Bunchen, who had been hovering restlessly about the room, stopped and rested his hand on my shoulder. "What you doing, Nick?" "I'm a bondman." "With who?" I told him. "Never heard of them," he remarked decisively. "That annoyed me." You will if you stay in the East." "Oh, East I'll stay. Oh, I'll stay in the East, don't you worry," he said, glancing at Daisy and then back at me as if he were alert for something more. "I'd be goddamn fool to live anywhere else." At this point, Miss Baker said absolutely with such suddenness that I started. It was the first word she had uttered since I came into the room. Evidently, it surprised her as much as it did for me, for she yawned with a series of rapid, deft movements, stood up into the corner. "I'm stiff," she complained. "I've been lying on that sofa for as long as I can remember." "Don't look at me," Daisy reported. "I've been trying to get you to New York all afternoon." "No, thanks," said Miss Baker to the 4 cocktails just in from the pantry. "I'm absolutely in training." Her host looked at her incredulously. "You are?" He took his down his drink uh, as if it were a drop in the bottom of the glass. "How you ever get anything done is beyond me." I looked at Miss Baker, wondering what it was she got done. I enjoyed looking at her. She was a slender, small-breasted girl with an erect carriage, she which she insinuated by throwing her body backwards at the shoulder like a young cadet. Her gray, sun-strained eyes looked back at me with a light, reciprocal curiosity of a wan, charming, discontented face. It occurred to me now that I've seen a picture of her somewhere before. "You lived in West Egg," she remarked contemplatively. "I know somebody there. I don't know. You must know Gapsy." "Gapsy?" demanded Daisy. "What Gapsy?" Before I replied that he was my neighbor, dinner was announced. Wedging through his tense arm impressively in mine, Tom Buchanan compelled me from the room as though he were moving a checker to another square. Slenderly, languidly, their hands set lightly on his hips, as the 2 young women preceded us out to a rosy colored porch, open toward the sunset, where 4 candles flickered on the table in the diminished wind. Why candles? Objected Daisy, frowning. She snapped out with her fingers. In 2 weeks, it'll be the longest day in the year. She looked at us radiantly. Do you always watch for the longest day of the year and miss it? I always watch for the longest day in the year and then miss it. We ought to plan something, yawned Miss Baker, as if she were getting bed. All right, well, we'll plan. What do people? Why do? She turned up to me helpfully. What do people plan? Before I could answer, her eyes fastened with an odd expression on her little finger. Look, she complained. I heard it. We all looked. The knuckle was black and blue. You did it, Tom, she said inclusively. I know you didn't mean to, but you did do it. That's what I get for marrying a brute of a man, a great, big, hulking, physical specimen of a. I hate that word, hulking, objected Tom crossly. Even in kidding, hulking, insisted Daisy. Sometimes she and Miss Baker talked at once, unobtrusively and with the bantering inconsequences that never quite chatter. That was as cool as their white dresses and their impersonal eyes in the absence of all desire. They were here, and they accepted Tom and me, making only a polite, pleasant offer to entertain or to be entertained. They knew that presently dinner would be a little later, evening too would be over and casually put away. It was sharply different from the West, where an evening was hurried from face to face towards its close in a continually disappointed anticipation or else in sheer nervous dread of the moment itself. You make me feel uncivilized, Daisy, I confessed on my second glass of corky but rather impressive. If Clara, could you talk about crops or something? I meant nothing in particular by this remark, but it was taken up in an unexpected hurry. Civilization's going into pieces, broke out Tom violently. I've gotten to be a terrible pessimist about things. Have you read The Rise of the Colored Empires by this man, Goddard? Why, no, I answered, rather surprised by his tone. Well, it's a fine book. Everybody ought to read it. The idea is, if we don't look out, the white race will be utterly submerged. It's all scientific and stuff. It's been proved. Tom is getting very profound, said Daisy with the expression of unthoughtful sadness. He reads deep books with long words in them. What was that word we... Well, these books are all scientific. Insisted Tom, glaring at her impatiently. This this fellow has worked out the whole thing. It's up to us, who are the dominant race, to watch oh, out, or these other races will have control of things. We ought to beat 'em down, whispered Daisy, winking ferociously toward the Feverent's son. You ought to live in California, began Miss Baker, but Tom interrupted her by shifting heavily in his chair. This idea is that we're Nordics. I am, and you are, and after an infinitesimal hesitation, he included Daisy with slight odd, and she winked at me again. And we've produced all the things that go to make civilization. Oh, science and art and all that. Do you see? There was something pathetic in his concentration, as if his complacency was more acute than of old. Was not enough up to him anymore when almost immediately the telephone rang and the butler left the porch. Daisy seized upon the momentary interruption and leaned towards me. I'll tell you a family secret, she whispered enthusiastically. It's about the butler's nose. Do you want to hear about the butler's nose? That's why I came over tonight. Well, he wasn't always a butler. He used to be a silver polisher for some people in New York that had silver service for 200 people. He had to polish it from morning till night until finally it began to affect the nose. Things went from bad to worse, suggested Mrs. Baker. Yes, things went from bad to worse until he finally had to give up his position. For a moment, the last sunshine fell out with romantic affection upon her glowing face. Her voice compelled me forward breathlessly as I listened. Then the glow faded, each light deserting her with lingering regret, like children leaving a pleasant street at dusk. The butler came back and murmured something else to Tom's ear, whereupon Tom frowned, pushed back his chair, and without a word went inside, as if his absence quickened something within her. Daisy leaned forward again, her voice glowing and singing. I love to see you at my table, Nick. You remind me of a rose, an absolute rose, doesn't he? She turned to Miss Baker for confirmation. An absolute rose? This was untrue. I'm not even faintly like a rose. She was only extemporizing, but a stirring warmth flowed from her, as if her art was trying to come out to you, sealed in one of those breathless, thrilling words. Then suddenly she threw her napkin on the table and excused herself and went into the house. Miss Baker and I exchanged a short glance of consciously devoid of meaning. I was about to speak when she said, up alert, and said, "Shh," in a warning voice. The subdued, impassioned murmur was audible in the room beyond, and Miss Baker leaned forward, unashamed, trying to hear it. The murmur trembled, a very confused, on the verge of coherence, sank down, mounted excitedly, and then ceased altogether. "This Miss Gatsby you spoke of is my neighbor," I began. "Don't talk. I want to hear what happens." "Is something happening?" I inquired insolently. You say you don't know?" Miss Baker, honestly surprised. "I thought everyone knew." "Everybody knew." "I don't. Why?" She said, "Howsy, Tom's got some new woman in New York." "Got some woman?" I repeated blankly. Miss Baker nodded. "She might have the decency not to telephone him at dinner time, don't you think?" Almost before I grasped her meaning, there was a flutter of a dress and the crunch of leather boots. Tom and Daisy were back at the table. "It couldn't be helped!" cried Daisy with tense gaiety. Give me a sec. I gotta get more water. My throat's acting up today. I'm gonna get a bigger cup.
What happened?
I got me a bigger cup. I'm coming back. Don't worry.
I'm reading the text.
I needed a bigger glass of water.
I got myself a drink too, but I'm reading some messages.
Hmm.
Just reading a book from her school or something. This
I
shit.
am. I am just reading books. It's a book by. It isn't even like the actual book. It's just a packet of every page printed. Anyway, back to our schedule.
We'll be right back. Someone's calling me, but I'll be
She
here on my
sat
phone.
down, glanced searchingly at Miss Baker, then at me, and continued, "I looked outdoors for a minute. It's a very romantic outdoors. There's a bird on the lawn that I think must be a nightingale come over on the Cunard or White Star Line. He's singing away," her voice sang. "It's romantic, isn't it, Tom?" "Very romantic," he said, then miserably to me, "if it's light enough after dinner. I want to take you down to the stables." The telephone rang inside, and startlingly, as Daisy shook her head decisively at Tom, the subject of stables, in fact, all subjects, vanished into the air. Among the broken fragments of the last 5 minutes at the table, I remember the candles being lit again. Pointlessly, and I was conscious of wanting to look squarely at everyone. And yet, to avoid all eyes, I couldn't guess what Daisy and Tom were thinking. But I doubt, even if Miss Baker, who seemed to have mastered a certainly hearty skepticism, was utterly able to put this fifth guest's shrill and metallic urgency out of mind, to certain temperate of the situation might have seemed intriguing. My own instinct was to telephone immediately for the police. Kayate! The horses, needless to say, were not mentioned again. Tom and Miss Baker, with several feet of twilight between them, strolled back into the library, as if to vigil besides a perfectly tangible body. While trying to look pleasantly interested and a little deaf, I followed Daisy around a chain of connecting verdants verandahs to a porch in the front. In its deep gloom, we sat down side to side on a wicker settee. Daisy took her face in her hands after feeling its lovely shape, and her eyes moved gradually out into the velvet dusk. I saw that turbulence of emotions possessed her, so I asked what I thought it would be some sedative questions about her little girl. We don't even know each other very well, Nick, she said suddenly. Even if we are cousins, you didn't come to my wedding. I wasn't back from the war. That's true, she hesitated. Well, I've had a very bad time, Nick, and I'm pretty cynical about everything. Evidently, she had a reason to be. I waited, but she didn't say any more. After a moment, I returned rather feebly to the subject of her daughter. I suppose she talks and eats and everything. Oh, yes, she looked at me absently. Listen, Nick, let me tell you what I said when she was born. Would you like to hear very much? It'll show you how much I got to feel about things. Well, she was less about an hour old, and Tom, it was God knows where. I woke up out of the ether with an utterly abandoning feeling, and I asked the nurse right away if it was a boy or girl. She told me it was a girl, and so I turned my head away and wept. All right, I said, I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in a beautiful little you see, I think everything's terrible anyhow, she went on in a convinced way. Everybody thinks so, the most advanced people, and I know I've been everywhere and seen everything and done everything. Her eyes flashed around her in a defiant way, rather like Tom's, and she laughed with string scorn. Sophisticated? God, I'm sophisticated. The instant her voice broke off, ceasing to compel my attention, my belief, I felt the basic insincerity of what she said. It made me uneasy, as though the whole evening had been a trick of some sort to exact a contributory emotion from me. I waited, and sure enough, in a moment she looked at me with an absolute smirk on her lovely face after she asserted her membership in a rather distinguished secret society, to which she and Tom belonged. Inside, the Crisman room bloomed with light. Tom and Miss Baker sat at either end of the long couch, and she read aloud to him from the Saturday Evening Post. The words, murmurous and uninflected, running together in a soothing tune. The lamplight bright on his boots, and dull on the autumn leaf yellow of her hair glinted along the paper as she turned the page with a flutter of slender muscles in her arm. When we came in, she held us silent for a moment with a lifted hand. To be continued, she said, tossing the magazine on the table in our very next issue. Her body asserted herself with a restless movement of her knee, and she stood up. 10 o'clock, she remarked, apparently finding time on the ceiling. Time for this good girl to go to bed. Jordan's going to play in the tournament tomorrow, explained Daisy. Over at Westchester. Oh, you're Jordan Baker. I knew now why her face was familiar. It was a pleasing, contemptuous expression, and had looked at me for me at rotographer pictures of her sporting in the life at Asheville and Hot Springs in Palm Beach. I've heard some story of her too, a critical, unpleasant story. But what it was I've forgotten long ago. Good night, she said softly. Wake me up at 8, won't you? If you'll get up. I will. Good night, Mr. Carraway. See you anon. Of course you will, confirmed Daisy, and I think, in fact, I think I'll arrange a marriage. Come over often, Nick, and I'll sort of fling you together. You know, lock you up accidentally in a linen closet and push you out of the seat of the boat, out to sea in a boat, all of that sort of thing. Good night, called Miss Baker from the stairs. I haven't heard a word. She's a nice girl, said Tom after a moment. They oughtn't to let her run away around the country this way. Who oughtn't to? Who ought to? Inquired Daisy coldly. Her family. Her family is one on it about 1,000 years old. Besides, Nick's going to look after her, aren't you, Nick? She's going to spend a lot of weekends out here this summer. I think he thinks the home influence will be good for her. Daisy and Tom looked for each other in silence. Is she from New York? I asked Willie from the Lewis girl. Our white girlhood was passed together there. Our beautiful white. Did you give Nick a little heart talk on the Vernon, Ann? Demanded Tom suddenly. Did I? She looked at me. I can't seem to remember, but I think we talked about the Nordic race. Yeah, I'm sure we did. It sort of crept up on us, and the first thing you know, I don't believe everything you hear, Nick, he advised me. I said lightly, and I heard nothing at all. And a few moments later, I got up to go home. They came to the door with me and stood side by side in a cheerful squirt of light. As I started my motor, Daisy peremptorily called, "Wait! I forgot to ask you something, and it's important. We heard you were engaged to a girl out to the west." "That's right," corroborated Tom calmly. "We heard that you were engaged. It's a libel. I'm too poor." "But we heard it," insisted Daisy, surprising me up by opening again and in a flower-like way. "We heard it from 3 people, so it must be true." Of course I knew what they were referring to, but I wasn't even Bagley and Changed. The fact the gossip had published the banns was one of the reasons I'd come to East. You can't stop going with an old friend on account of roosters, and on the other hand, I had no intention of being rumored into marriage. Their interest rather touched me and made me less remotely rich. Nevertheless, I was too confused and a little disgusted as I drove away. It seemed to me that the thing for Daisy to do was rush out of the house, child in her arms, but apparently there was no such intentions in her head. As for Tom, he had some woman in New York was really less surprising than it had been depressed by a book. Something was making him nibble at the edge of stale ideas as if his sturdy physical egotism no longer nourished his peremptory heart. Already it was a deep summer on our roadhouse roofs, and in front of wayside garages where the new red petrol pumps sat out in pools of light, and when I reached my estate at West Egg, I ran the car under its shed and sat for a while on abandoned grass to roller in the yard. The wind half blown off, leaving a loud, bright night with wings beating in the trees and persistent organs sounding as the full bellows of the earth blew the frogs full of life. The silhouette of a moving cat wavered across the moonlight, and turning my head to watch it, I saw I was not alone. 50 feet, a figure had emerged from the shadow of my neighbor's mansion, and standing with his hands and his pockets regarding the silver pepper of the stars. Something in his leisurely movements, in the secure position of his feet and lawn, suggested that it was Mr. Gabbsey himself, come out to determine what his share was his of our local heavens. I've decided to call out to him. Miss Baker had mentioned him at dinner, and that would do for an introduction, but I didn't call out to him, for he gave us some intimation that he was content to be alone. He stretched out his arms toward the dark water in a curious way, and as far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. Involuntarily, I glanced seaward and distinguished him as nothing except the single green light, minute and far away. That might have been the end of the dock. When I looked once more for Gadsby, he had vanished, and I was alone again in the unique quiet of the darkness. End of chapter 1. Okay, give me a second to answer these questions. Oh, fuck! Give me a sec. I spilled water. Damn it. Oh, damn. Okay, give me a second. That's wet now. This is also wet. Damn it. Good thing I had it not near my setup. Okay. Oh, the book's wet. I'm sorry for jump scaring y'all. Alright. I think we're gonna read a chapter each time I do one of these streams. So I'll probably do some later this week. Probably tomorrow, maybe. But anyway, Who's ready for the question? I've already answered some of the questions. And the last question was the one I was stuck on when I read this the first time. But I have it now. Hold on, let me go back and find this. Yeah, I'm gonna clean up this water, but we'll start doing this a bit, because it seems to be, you seem to like this. This. We could read chat for a bit, I guess. Anyone want to talk in chat? I see Ratty's in chat. Yep.
I think, is it done yet?
Yeah, I read one whole chapter. Probably read a chapter each time I stream this, because, how long has the stream been? Let's see. 51 minutes. It's been almost an hour.
Can we
For,
continue the stream on my server?
I meant, we could. I was gonna stream, different days of the week.
What? Yeah, speaking about, I've been here. I heard you're doing that, but I don't know what the thing is. I'm just making so you get accepted automatically. But yeah.
Alright. Well, what did you guys think of the stream? Everyone in chat, what did you think of the stream, considering there's 3 people still here?
My little sister included.
Yeah, there was probably do this again. It's a nice change of pace. Start hosting study sessions, but just you using YouTube. I also need to make sure I keep my allergy pills next to me because my throat's acting up because of my allergies. Alright. Have a good one, everyone. I'm going to do the...
Minecraft stream.
No, I'm gonna transition to... Stream ended. Dr. Planet, do you have anything to say?
It was nice being here with y'all. See y'all later, folks, on the next stream. If I even do be on there.
Oh, you wanna... Gupta, we just ended the stream, gang. We just ended the stream because my throat's acting up and I spilled a whole thing of water.
Wait, is that why you ended the stream?
Yeah, it isn't fully ended yet. Hold on. Let me transition back to this. Ranguka, we just ended. Hold on. Let me, we just ended stream.
I mean, we can continue it playing a different thing or doing something else, like...
No, I gotta clean up this mess.
Oh.
Well, okay.